The conference room felt smaller now that Admiral Corveth understood he was surrounded by 4,000 enemy vessels. He sat in silence for several minutes, studying the tactical displays. Each human ship represented technology decades ahead of anything in Kethmaran databases. Each vessel was crewed by a species that had somehow concealed their true capabilities from galactic civilization. "Sir," his communications officer reported nervously, "the human administrator is requesting another meeting. He says there are additional matters to discuss." The Admiral almost laughed. Additional matters? What more could these humans possibly reveal? They had already demonstrated military technology that made the Third Battle Fleet obsolete. They had surrounded his forces without being detected. What other surprises did they have prepared? Very well, he decided. But this time the meeting takes place here on the bridge. I want my entire staff to hear whatever they have to say. Jake. Morrison returned 20 minutes later, accompanied by different humans. Dr. Amy Brooks introduced herself as New Eden's xenobiologist. Captain Ryan Cole commanded something called the Silent Hunter. Both carried themselves with the same disturbing confidence Morrison had displayed. "Admiral, I believe we owe you a more complete explanation of humanity's situation," Morrison began. "Our previous conversation focused on military capabilities, but there are other factors you should understand." Dr. Brooks activated a holographic projector that filled the center of the bridge with a three-dimensional star map. Hundreds of systems were marked with different colored symbols. Red indicated Kethmaran territories. Blue marked independent worlds. Green showed unexplored regions. "This represents current galactic civilization as mapped by human reconnaissance," she explained. "We've been observing your expansion for the past 80 years. Every world you've conquered, every species you've displaced, every battle fleet movement." The Admiral studied the display with growing unease. The level of detail was staggering. Human intelligence had tracked Kethmaran activities across dozens of star systems. They knew fleet dispositions. They knew resource production levels. They knew everything. "Why?" he asked. "Why spend so much effort studying our empire?" Morrison gestured to the star map. "Because the Kethmaran Empire represents exactly the kind of predatory civilization humanity hoped never to encounter. You expand by conquering weaker species. You take their worlds and enslave or displace their populations. You are essentially galactic parasites." Captain Cole stepped forward. "Admiral, your species evolved on a paradise world with abundant resources and no natural predators. You developed space travel and found a galaxy full of species just like yourselves. Peaceful, cooperative, naive." The hologram shifted to show Earth rotating slowly in space. The planet looked beautiful from orbit with its blue oceans and white clouds. But as the display zoomed closer, the reality became apparent. Massive storm systems covered entire continents. Volcanic activity lit the night side like a Christmas tree. Ocean currents moved with terrifying violence. Humanity evolved under very different conditions, Dr. Brooks explained. "Earth is what we call a forge world. It creates either victims or apex predators. There is no middle ground for survival." She touched controls and the display changed to show Earth's surface. Creatures moved through dense forests with predatory grace. Massive beasts dominated open plains. Even the plant life appeared aggressive and dangerous. "Every living thing on Earth is designed to kill something else," she continued. "The herbivores are armored and armed. The carnivores are living weapons. The omnivores, like humanity, are the deadliest of all because we learned to hunt everything." Admiral Corveth watched footage of human ancestors stalking prey across African savannas. Small groups of primitive humans bringing down creatures 10 times their size through coordination and persistence. The same intelligence that had surrounded his fleet with invisible warships. "You developed into persistence hunters," he observed. "Your species specializes in wearing down stronger opponents." Morrison nodded. "Exactly. Humans don't win through superior strength or speed. We win through superior tactics and refusing to give up. We track our prey across continents if necessary. We adapt to any environment. We learn from every failure." The star map returned but now showed additional information. Human settlements appeared throughout the galaxy marked with green symbols. Not just New Eden, but dozens of colonies scattered across known space. How many worlds do you control? The Admiral asked. None, Morrison replied. Humanity doesn't believe in controlling other species. We establish colonies for research and observation. We study galactic civilization looking for potential friends and allies. Captain Cole manipulated the display to highlight specific systems. Unfortunately, we've also been forced to identify potential threats. Species like the Kethmoran Empire that expand through conquest rather than cooperation. Red markers appeared throughout the map indicating hostile civilizations. The Admiral counted 17 different empires similar to his own, all expanding, all conquering weaker neighbors, all following the same predatory pattern. You've been watching all of us, he realized. For decades, Morrison confirmed. Humanity hoped that galactic civilization would prove to be peaceful and cooperative. Instead, we found a cosmos dominated by predators preying on herbivores. Species like yours, that take what they want through force. Dr. Brooks brought up new data showing population statistics and resource distribution. The numbers painted a disturbing picture. Advanced species controlled most inhabitable worlds while primitive species were displaced or enslaved. Galactic civilization was essentially a feeding hierarchy. The strong dominate the weak, she explained. Natural selection on a galactic scale. Exactly what we expected to find given the species involved. Admiral Korveth studied the information with professional interest. Your analysis is correct. The galaxy belongs to whoever can take it. That has always been the natural order. Not where humanity comes from, Captain Cole said quietly. On Earth, the natural order is that apex predators control hunting territories and protect them from competitors. We don't prey on herbivores. We eliminate other predators. The implications hit the Admiral like a physical blow. Humanity wasn't planning to conquer territory like other advanced species. They were planning to eliminate competition. They saw empires like the Kethmorans as rivals to be destroyed rather than enemies to be defeated. You're talking about genocide, he said. Morrison shook his head. We're talking about ending an era of galactic bullying. The Kethmoran Empire has displaced millions of beings from their homeworlds. You've enslaved entire species. You've turned peaceful civilizations into tribute-paying vassals. The star map changed again, showing human fleet positions throughout Kethmoran space. While Admiral Korveth had been traveling to New Eden, human forces had been surrounding every major world in the Empire. Not just military targets, but population, centers, and industrial facilities. This is impossible, the Admiral protested. Our intelligence services would have detected such massive troop movements. Captain Cole smiled coldly. Admiral, your intelligence services are designed to monitor primitive species using conventional technology. You've never encountered a civilization that evolved specifically to hunt other intelligent species. Dr. Brooks manipulated the display to show comparative technology levels. Human stealth systems were centuries ahead of Kethmoran detection capabilities. Human weapons were designed for maximum efficiency rather than intimidation. Human tactics assumed the enemy was equally intelligent and dangerous. The Kethmoran Empire builds fleets to frighten primitives into surrender, she explained. Humanity builds fleets to kill other humans who are just as clever and dangerous as we are. There is a fundamental difference in approach. Admiral Korveth looked around his bridge at officers who suddenly seemed very young and inexperienced. They had spent their careers conquering peaceful worlds and suppressing weak resistance movements. None had ever faced an enemy that was smarter, more dangerous, and better prepared. What do you want from us? He asked. Morrison stood and prepared to leave. Admiral Korveth, the Kethmoran Empire's expansion has ended as of today. Your forces will withdraw from all conquered territories. Your government will provide reparations to displaced populations. Your military will be reduced to defensive levels only. And if we refuse? Captain Cole's expression hardened. Then humanity will demonstrate why we are the apex predator species in this galaxy. We really hoped it wouldn't come to that, Admiral, but your empire has left us no choice. The massive alien ship hung in space like a silver moon above New Eden. Ambassador Zixthor stood in his quarters aboard the diplomatic vessel Harmony's Voice. and looked down at the human colony with mild interest. The planet below showed all the usual signs of a primitive civilization. Small cities dotted the surface. Simple roads connected farming areas. A few satellites orbited the world, but nothing that suggested advanced technology. Zixthor had done this same task 47 times before. Each time the result was identical. The primitive species would listen to his message. They would panic. They would beg for more time. Then they would either flee their world or submit to Kethmoran rule. It was a process as predictable as sunrise. He adjusted his ceremonial robes and walked to the communication chamber. The human leaders had requested this meeting after receiving his initial message 3 days ago. They wanted to discuss terms, they said. Zixthor found their optimism amusing. There were no terms to discuss. The Kethmoran Empire had already decided the fate of this world. The holographic display activated and showed 2 humans sitting at a simple metal table. The male appeared to be middle-aged, with short brown hair and calm eyes. The female had blonde hair pulled back and wore what looked like a military uniform. Both seemed remarkably composed for representatives of a species facing extinction or exile. "I am Ambassador Zixthor of the Kethmoran Empire," he began in his most formal tone. "I trust you have considered our generous offer." The human male leaned forward slightly. "I'm Jake Morrison, administrator of New Eden Colony. This is Lisa Taylor, our security chief. We've given your proposal careful thought." Zixthor waited. This was usually when the begging began. Instead, Jake Morrison simply looked back at him with the same calm expression. "We appreciate that the Kethmoran Empire has taken an interest in our small colony," Morrison continued. "However, we need to consult with Earth before making such an important decision." This was unexpected. Most primitive species had no central authority to consult. They made decisions locally, out of fear and desperation. Zixthor had never encountered a species that claimed to need permission from their homeworld. "You misunderstand the situation," Zixthor explained patiently. "This is not a negotiation. The Kethmoran Empire has claimed this system. You have 72 hours to evacuate or face pacification protocols. There is no third option." "Lisa," Taylor spoke for the first time. "We understand your position. We're simply asking for time to coordinate with our government. 72 hours should be sufficient." Zixthor studied the 2 humans. Their behavior was puzzling. They showed no fear. They made no emotional appeals. They simply stated their position as if they had some authority in this matter. It was almost as if they believed they could refuse the Empire's demands. "Very well," Zixthor said. "You have 72 hours. I suggest you use this time wisely. The Kethmoran fleet will arrive precisely on schedule." The humans thanked him politely and ended the transmission. Zixthor stared at the blank screen for several minutes. In 47 previous encounters, no species had ever been so calm when facing displacement. Most begged for mercy or offered tribute. Some threatened futile resistance. None had ever simply asked for time to make phone calls. He reviewed the intelligence reports on humanity one more time. The species had only recently achieved interstellar travel. Their fastest ships took months to travel between stars. Their weapons were based on chemical explosives and metal projectiles. They had no energy shields or plasma weapons. By every measure, they were centuries behind Kethmoran technology. Yet something about the human response troubled him. They acted like they had options, like they had some plan or resource that the Empire's intelligence had missed. Zixthor had learned to trust his instincts over the years. Right now, his instincts were warning him that something was wrong with this picture. He opened a communication channel to Fleet Admiral Corveth. The Admiral's massive face appeared on screen surrounded by the bridge of his flagship. Corveth commanded the 3rd Battle Fleet and had never lost a campaign in 30 years of service. "The humans have requested 72 hours to evacuate," Zixthor reported. "They claim they need to consult with their homeworld." Admiral Corveth laughed. "Let them waste their time making calls. It changes nothing. The 3rd Fleet will arrive on schedule and this system will belong to the Empire." "Something feels different about these humans," Zixthor said carefully. They show no fear. They act as if they have some hidden advantage. The Admiral's expression hardened. 47 worlds have fallen to our expansion. 47 species have learned that resistance is futile. These humans will be no different. Primitive species often exhibit false bravado when first contacted. Reality sets in when they see our battle fleet. Zixthor nodded but remained unconvinced. He had observed many species in their final hours of independence. Terror was the universal response. Humans appeared to be genuinely unafraid. Either they were incredibly naive or they knew something the Kethmaran Empire did not. The next 72 hours passed slowly. Zixthor monitored human communications but learned nothing useful. The colonists went about their normal activities. Children played in streets. Adults worked in fields and factories. No one appeared to be packing for evacuation. No one seemed to be preparing for war either. Long-range sensors detected no unusual activity in the system. No hidden fleets appeared. No defensive platforms activated. The humans simply waited as if time was on their side. Admiral Corveth arrived precisely on schedule with 200 warships. The third battle fleet was an impressive sight. Massive dreadnoughts bristled with weapons. Cruisers and destroyers formed protective formations. Fighter squadrons patrolled the edges of the fleet formation. Zixthor transferred to the flagship and took his position on the bridge. Through the viewports he could see New Eden hanging in space like a blue jewel. The human colony looked so small and helpless compared to the assembled might of the Empire. "Send the final ultimatum," Admiral Corveth commanded. "Tell them they have 1 hour to begin evacuation or face the consequences." The communication officer sent the message and waited for a response. Minutes passed in silence. Finally, the reply came through. It was Jake Morrison again, still showing the same impossible calm. "Admiral Corveth, I'm afraid we must decline your generous offer. Humanity has decided to remain on New Eden. We would, however, like to request a meeting to discuss this situation." The bridge fell silent. In the Empire's entire history, no primitive species had ever refused evacuation when faced with a battle fleet. The audacity was breathtaking. Admiral Corveth stared at the screen in disbelief. "They refuse?" he said slowly. "They actually refuse?" "It would appear so," Zixthor replied. His instincts had been correct. The humans were hiding something. The question was, what could a primitive species possibly have that would make them confident enough to face the third battle fleet? Admiral Corveth paced the bridge of his flagship like a caged predator. In 30 years of military service, he had never encountered such insolence. Primitive species were supposed to cower before the might of the Kethmaran Empire. They were supposed to beg for mercy or flee in terror. They were not supposed to politely decline ultimatums and request meetings. "Sir, the human representative is requesting permission to come aboard," reported the communications officer. "He says he has authority to speak for their government." The Admiral stopped pacing. Part of him wanted to refuse the meeting and simply begin bombardment. But curiosity held him back. He needed to understand what made these humans so confident. Were they insane? Did they have some hidden weapon? Or were they simply too primitive to understand the danger they faced? "Grant permission," he decided. "But maximum security protocols. I want guards at every corridor junction." 30 minutes. Later, Jake Morrison materialized on the transport pad accompanied by 2 other humans. The man looked exactly as he had during the transmissions. Average height and build. Simple clothing. Nothing about his appearance suggested he represented a threat to galactic civilization. The other humans were equally unremarkable. A woman with red hair who introduced herself as Dr. Helen Carter, and a man in military uniform who gave his name as Captain Tony Brooks. They followed Morrison with the casual confidence of people visiting friends rather than boarding an enemy warship. Admiral Corveth met them in Conference Room 7, surrounded by his senior staff. The humans took seats at the table as if this were a routine business meeting. Morrison opened a simple briefcase and removed what appeared to be paper documents. "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting, Admiral," Morrison began. "We understand this situation must be confusing for you. The Kethmoran Empire is accustomed to dealing with less developed species. Less developed? The Admiral's eyes narrowed. These humans had barely mastered spaceflight and they were calling other species less developed? Perhaps there has been some misunderstanding, Korveth said with forced patience. The third battle fleet contains 200 warships. Each vessel carries weapons capable of cracking continental plates. We have the firepower to sterilize your entire world within hours. Morrison nodded politely. Yes, we detected your fleet's arrival. Impressive ships. Your technology appears to be roughly equivalent to what humanity developed about 400 years ago. The bridge fell silent. Captain Tony Brooks leaned forward and placed a small device on the table. With your permission, Admiral, I'd like to demonstrate something. Please order your sensors to scan the outer system. Admiral Korveth looked at his tactical officer, who shrugged and activated the long-range sensors. The displays showed empty space beyond New Eden's orbit. No ships, no anomalies, nothing but asteroids and cosmic dust. Your sensors detect nothing unusual, Morrison observed. Now, Captain Brooks, if you would. Brooks pressed a button on his device. Instantly, the sensor displays erupted with new contacts. 13 ships appeared as if materializing from nowhere. The tactical officer stared at his screens in confusion. Impossible, he muttered. These readings make no sense. The ships were not there a moment ago. Actually, they were, Dr. Carter explained. 13 human vessels have been monitoring this meeting since your fleet arrived. Your sensors cannot detect them because our stealth technology is approximately 4 centuries ahead of your detection systems. Admiral Korveth felt the first stirrings of unease. The human ships on his screens were smaller than Keith Moran vessels, but their very presence proved capabilities far beyond what intelligence reports suggested. This is some kind of trick, he said. Sensor ghosts. Electronic warfare. Morrison shook his head. I'm afraid not, Admiral. Those are real ships crewed by real people. People who have been watching your fleet and recording everything for the past 3 days. The Admiral's tactical officer was running every diagnostic he knew. Sir, the contacts are solid. Mass readings are consistent. Energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases. Let me explain our situation, Morrison continued calmly. The Kethmoran Empire has an impressive record of expansion. 47 worlds conquered in the past century. Very efficient, very professional. Unfortunately, you've made a critical error in your assessment of humanity. What error? Korveth demanded. Dr. Carter opened her own briefcase and removed what looked like a child's toy. It was a small model of a planet with continents and oceans. She set it on the table where it began to rotate slowly. This is Earth, she explained. Our homeworld. Your intelligence reports classify it as a Class 12 death world. That classification is actually conservative. Earth should probably be rated Class 15 or higher. The Kethmoran officers exchanged glances. Class 12 was already considered uninhabitable by most galactic standards. Class 15 was theoretical. No known species had ever evolved on such a hostile world. Death world classifications are based on multiple factors, Dr. Carter continued. Climate extremes, tectonic activity, radiation levels, biological hazards. Earth scores in the 99th percentile for every category. She touched the model, planet, and it began displaying information. Temperature variations that would kill most species. Atmospheric pressure changes that would crush unprotected visitors. Gravitational forces that would cripple natives of low-gravity worlds. The weather on Earth regularly produces storms with winds exceeding 200 kilometers per hour, she explained. The surface is covered with active volcanoes. The oceans contain predators larger than your shuttlecraft. The very air is corrosive to most galactic species. Morrison took over the explanation. Humanity didn't just survive on Earth, Admiral. We thrived. We developed into the most efficient predator species this galaxy has ever produced. We spent millions of years learning to hunt and kill everything on our world, including each other. The Admiral's unease was growing into genuine concern. You're trying to frighten us with tall tales about your homeworld. It changes nothing. You have 13 ships. We have 200. Captain Brooks smiled for the first time since boarding the flagship. Admiral, with respect, you still don't understand the situation. Those 13 ships aren't our invasion force. "They're our scouting unit." He pressed another button on his device. The sensor displays exploded with new contacts. Dozens of ships appeared throughout the system, then hundreds, then thousands. Each vessel materialized from nowhere as their stealth systems deactivated. The Kethmoran Empire has spent decades building a fleet designed to intimidate primitive species. Morrison explained. Humanity has spent centuries building fleets designed to fight other humans. There is a significant difference in philosophy. Admiral Corveth stared at the tactical displays in growing horror. Human ships surrounded his fleet from every angle. They had somehow positioned thousands of vessels throughout the system without being detected. The third battle fleet was completely surrounded. "How many ships do you have?" he asked quietly. "In this system?" "About 4,000, Brooks replied casually. Each one crewed by veterans who grew up playing strategic war games that simulate galactic combat as entertainment. Dr. Carter leaned back in her chair. The Kethmoran Empire conquers worlds by arriving with overwhelming force and demanding surrender. It's an effective strategy against peaceful species. Unfortunately, Admiral, you've just encountered the deadliest predator species in known space. Morrison closed his briefcase and stood up. "We didn't want this confrontation. Humanity spent decades observing galactic civilization, hoping to find peaceful neighbors. Your ultimatum has forced us to abandon that hope." The Admiral looked around. His bridge. His officers were staring at sensor readings that made no sense. Enemy ships filled space in every direction. Ships that had been invisible until moments ago. Ships built by a species that had somehow hidden their true nature from galactic intelligence services. "What do you want?" he asked. Morrison paused at the door. "Admiral Corveth, you've just made first contact with a species that spent 4 million years learning to kill the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. The most dangerous creatures were other humans. We really hoped it wouldn't come to this." The humans left the conference room escorted by guards who suddenly looked very nervous. Admiral Corveth remained seated, staring at displays showing thousands of enemy vessels. Vessels commanded by a species that had evolved on a world so hostile that survival required becoming the ultimate predator. For the first time in 30 years of service, Admiral Corveth was genuinely afraid. Admiral Corveth spent the next hour in emergency conference with his senior staff. The tactical situation was impossible. 4,000 human vessels surrounded the third battle fleet using technology decades ahead of anything in Kethmoran arsenals. Each enemy ship was commanded by officers who had evolved on a death world that made survival itself an act of warfare. "Options?" he asked his staff. Captain Veltar, his tactical officer, reviewed the sensor data for the third time. "Sir, the human vessels are positioned at optimal firing angles throughout the system. They've established overlapping fields of fire that would allow them to destroy our entire fleet within minutes." "What about retreat?" suggested Commander Nexrian. "From engineering." "Impossible," replied the navigation officer. "Human ships are positioned along every escape route. They anticipated our tactical doctrine and countered it perfectly." Admiral Corveth nodded grimly. The third battle fleet had been designed to intimidate primitive species into surrender. Large, impressive vessels with massive weapons, meant to be seen and feared. But the humans had surrounded his force with smaller, more maneuverable ships that prioritized function over appearance. "Sir," the communications officer interrupted. "We're receiving a transmission from the human administrator. He's requesting another meeting." The Admiral almost refused, but curiosity won over pride. These humans had demonstrated capabilities that made no sense according to galactic intelligence. What other surprises were they preparing to reveal? Jake. Morrison materialized on the bridge surrounded by a different group of humans. Colonel Steve Parker wore military uniform covered with insignia that meant nothing to Kethmoran observers. Dr. Linda Ross carried scientific instruments that looked decades ahead of known technology. Captain Paul Johnson moved with the fluid grace of someone accustomed to zero-gravity combat. "Admiral, I hope you've had time to consider our previous discussion," Morrison began politely. "We understand this situation represents a significant change in galactic dynamics." "You have us surrounded," Corveth replied bluntly. "What more do you want to discuss?" Colonel Parker stepped forward and activated a holographic projector. The display showed real-time positions of every ship in the system. Kethmoran vessels appeared as red dots clustered in defensive formations. Human ships formed a three-dimensional web throughout local space. "Admiral, your tactical assessment is correct," Parker acknowledged. "The third battle fleet is completely surrounded. However, I want you to understand that this represents only a small fraction of human military capabilities." The hologram expanded to show the entire Kethmoran Empire. Red indicators marked major fleet concentrations and industrial centers. Green dots appeared throughout the display representing human forces positioned near every critical target. "While you were traveling to New Eden, our advance forces were deploying throughout your territory," Parker explained. "Right now, human ships are positioned within striking distance of your homeworld and 46 colonial systems." Admiral Corveth stared at the display in disbelief. The scale of the operation was staggering. Humanity had somehow moved thousands of vessels across dozens of star systems without being detected by any Kethmoran sensor network. "This is impossible," he protested. "Our security services monitor all traffic in Empire space. No fleet movements of this magnitude could go undetected." Dr. Ross activated her instruments and the bridge's sensor displays changed dramatically. Dozens of additional contacts appeared throughout local space. Human vessels that had been invisible moments earlier revealed themselves like predators stepping from shadows. "Admiral, your security services are designed to detect conventional space traffic," she explained. "Chemical rockets, fusion drives, electromagnetic emissions that follow predictable patterns." She manipulated her controls and showed energy signatures from the newly revealed ships. The readings were unlike anything in Kethmoran databases. Propulsion systems that produced minimal emissions, power sources that operated at impossible efficiency levels, stealth technology that bent sensor waves around hull configurations. "Human ships use what we call dark running protocols," she continued. "We developed these techniques specifically to avoid detection by advanced sensor networks. Your intelligence services never had a chance of spotting our deployments." Captain Johnson brought up additional tactical information, showing human fleet compositions throughout Kethmoran space. Each battle group was positioned to strike multiple targets simultaneously: industrial centers, military bases, government facilities, population centers. "Humanity doesn't fight wars the way other species do," he explained. "We don't capture territory or demand tribute. When humans go to war, the objective is complete elimination of the enemy's ability to threaten anyone ever again." The Admiral studied the deployment patterns with professional interest. Human forces were positioned to cripple the entire Kethmoran Empire within hours, not just military defeat but complete systematic destruction of governmental and industrial infrastructure. "You're planning to destroy our entire civilization," he said. Morrison shook his head. "We're planning to end your empire's expansion. The Kethmoran people will survive, but your government's ability to threaten other species will not." Colonel Parker manipulated the display to show comparative force structures. The third battle fleet represented the Empire's most powerful military formation. Yet human forces in this system alone outnumbered it 4-1. Throughout Kethmoran space, the ratio was even more overwhelming. "Admiral, your empire has 47 conquered worlds and approximately 6,000 military vessels," Parker continued. "Humanity has deployed 12,000 ships for this operation, each crewed by veterans who spent their entire lives training to fight enemies just as dangerous as themselves." Dr. Ross activated new instruments that analyzed Kethmoran ship configurations in real time, defensive capabilities, weapon systems, structural weaknesses. The human computers identified optimal attack vectors within seconds. "Your vessels are impressive, Admiral," she observed. "Large crews, heavy armor, powerful weapons designed to bombard planetary surfaces. Unfortunately, they're also optimized for fighting species that can't fight back." The tactical display showed attack simulations running in real time. Human ships engaged Kethmoran vessels using coordinated tactics that exploited every weakness in Imperial ship design. The battles lasted minutes rather than hours. "We've been studying your military doctrine for decades," Captain Johnson explained. "Every battle, every conquest, every tactical formation. Human strategists have identified 17 different ways to defeat Kethmoran fleets using force ratios of less than 2-1. Admiral Corveth looked around his bridge at officers who suddenly seemed very inexperienced. They had spent careers fighting species armed with chemical explosives and metal projectiles. None had ever faced enemies equipped with weapons that operated on principles beyond their understanding. "What are your terms?" he asked quietly. Morrison consulted notes on a simple paper tablet. "The Kethmoran Empire will immediately cease all military operations against independent worlds. Your forces will withdraw to your original territory before expansion began. Reparations will be paid to all species displaced by your conquests. And if our government refuses these terms?" Colonel Parker's expression hardened. "Then humanity will demonstrate what happens when apex predators decide a species represents a threat to galactic stability." The holographic display changed to "Show Earth's solar system." Massive industrial complexes orbited the human homeworld. Shipyards that dwarfed anything in Kethmoran space. Manufacturing facilities that could produce fleets faster than most species could count them. "Admiral, the forces deployed against your empire represent approximately 15% of human military capability," Parker continued. "We maintain strategic reserves sufficient to fight every advanced civilization in the galaxy simultaneously." Dr. Ross brought up population statistics comparing different species. Humans numbered in the hundreds of billions spread across dozens of worlds. Each human received military training from childhood. Each was raised on a death world that made survival itself an act of warfare. "The Kethmoran Empire has dominated this region of space for a century," she explained. "But you've been expanding in a galaxy where the apex predator species was still learning to use tools. That era has ended." Admiral Corveth stared at displays showing the true scope of human civilization. Industrial capacity that exceeded the combined output of a dozen empires. Military technology centuries ahead of galactic standards. A population trained from birth to survive conditions that would kill most sentient species. "How long do I have to convince my government?" he asked. Morrison checked his notes again. "Admiral Corveth, you have 72 hours to contact your leadership and explain the new reality. After that time period expires, humanity will assume the Kethmoran Empire has chosen warfare over cooperation." The humans began preparing to leave, but Captain Johnson paused at the door. "Admiral, there is one more thing you should understand. This conversation is being broadcast live to every Kethmoran ship in your fleet and every major population center in your empire." "Your people are watching this meeting?" the Admiral asked. The battle lasted exactly 17 minutes. Admiral Corveth had spent those minutes watching his life's work die around him. The third battle fleet had been the pride of the Kethmoran Empire. 200 warships crewed by the best officers and soldiers his species could produce. They had lasted barely longer than it took to drink a cup of tea. The human attack came without warning or fanfare. No dramatic speeches, no ultimatums, no opportunity for heroic last stands. One moment, the Kethmoran fleet was maintaining formation around New Eden. The next moment, it was burning wreckage drifting through space. Human ships emerged from stealth like predators materializing from shadows. Their weapons were unlike anything in galactic warfare. No massive energy beams that could be seen across star systems. No nuclear explosions that announced their power to the universe. Just silent, efficient destruction that turned Kethmoran vessels into expanding clouds of debris. Admiral Corveth's flagship survived only because the humans allowed it to survive. Captain Ryan Cole had explained this with disturbing politeness as Kethmoran rescue shuttles collected survivors from destroyed vessels. The silent hunter could have vaporized the command ship at any point during the engagement, but humanity needed someone to carry a message home. "Admiral, your government has 48 hours to announce full withdrawal from all conquered territories," Cole had explained. "After that time period expires, human forces throughout your empire will begin what we call pacification protocols." Now Admiral Corveth sat in his damaged flagship watching human vessels establish orbital platforms around New Eden. The construction work proceeded with mechanical efficiency. Within hours, the humans had deployed defensive systems that made the planet untouchable by any conceivable Kethmoran assault. Dr. Nathan Wright materialized on the bridge surrounded by holographic projectors and scientific instruments. He introduced himself as humanity's lead xenopsychologist and began setting up equipment with the casual confidence of someone working in his own laboratory. Admiral, I need to explain some additional factors that will affect future relations between our species, Wright began. The engagement you just witnessed represents only the beginning of humanity's intervention in galactic affairs. The holographic displays activated showing real-time communications from throughout Kethmoran space, government facilities, military, headquarters, industrial centers. Every major installation in the Empire was receiving identical messages from human diplomatic teams. While your fleet was being neutralized, our diplomatic corps was delivering ultimatums to 17 different species. Wright continued. Every expansionist empire in this region of the galaxy received the same message your government is hearing. Right now, Admiral Corveth watched footage of human ambassadors addressing alien leaders across dozens of star systems. Each meeting followed the same pattern: polite introductions, explanation of new realities, ultimatums delivered with quiet confidence. You're dismantling galactic civilization, he said. Wright shook his head. We're ending an era of predatory expansion that has dominated this galaxy for centuries. 17 different empires have been conquering weaker species and enslaving their populations. That practice stops today. The displays showed human fleets positioned throughout known space, not just around Kethmoran territories, but near every aggressive civilization humanity had identified. Thousands of ships crewed by beings who had evolved specifically to eliminate threats to galactic stability. What gives you the right? The Admiral asked. Dr. Wright activated new instruments that analyzed Kethmoran's psychological profiles in real time. Brain chemistry, stress responses, behavioral patterns developed over millions of years of evolution on a paradise world. Admiral, your species evolved in conditions that made cooperation and peaceful expansion the optimal survival strategy, he explained. You developed space travel and found a galaxy full of species with similar psychological profiles, all peaceful, all cooperative, all vulnerable to predators. The psychological profiles expanded to show comparative analysis between different galactic species. Herbivores, omnivores adapted to low-stress environments, a few carnivores from worlds with limited predator populations, all following similar behavioral patterns. Galactic civilization developed along predictable lines, Wright continued. Advanced species conquered primitive ones. The strong dominated the weak. Natural selection on a cosmic scale favored aggressive expansion over peaceful cooperation. New data appeared showing resource distribution and population statistics throughout known space. The numbers painted a disturbing picture. Less than 20% of habitable worlds were controlled by their original inhabitants. The rest had been conquered or claimed by expanding empires. Unfortunately for existing power structures, humanity evolved under very different conditions, Wright said. Earth produced a species specifically adapted to eliminate other apex predators. We don't conquer territory. We eliminate competition. Admiral Corveth studied the psychological profiles with professional interest. Humans showed brain chemistry optimized for pack hunting and coordinated violence. Stress responses that improve performance rather than impairing it. Behavioral patterns developed through millions of years of warfare against equally dangerous enemies. You're natural killers, he observed. We're natural protectors, Wright corrected. Humans evolved to defend hunting territories from other predators. The same instincts that protected our tribes on Earth now protect vulnerable species throughout the galaxy. The displays changed to show human colony ships approaching worlds recently liberated from various empires. Not invasion fleets, but transport, vessels carrying supplies and technical assistance. Refugee ships returning displaced populations to their homeworlds. The age of galactic expansion through conquest is over, Admiral, Wright explained. Humanity is establishing what we call the protection protocols. Any species that threatens peaceful civilizations will face immediate intervention by human forces. General Patricia Davis materialized on the bridge carrying military insignia that meant nothing to Kethmoran observers, but somehow conveyed absolute authority. She introduced herself as commander of human peacekeeping operations, and began reviewing tactical reports with mechanical efficiency. Admiral Corveth, 17 different empires have accepted humanity's terms for withdrawal from conquered territories, she announced. The Kethmaran government has 60 minutes remaining to join that list or face the consequences. The holographic displays showed human fleets throughout the galaxy, establishing orbital platforms around liberated worlds, defensive systems that made those planets untouchable by future aggression, industrial facilities that could produce everything needed for reconstruction and development. "You're building an empire of your own," the Admiral said. General Davis shook her head. "We're building a protective network. Human forces will defend vulnerable species, but we have no interest in ruling them. Galactic civilization will be free to develop peacefully without interference from predatory empires." Director Kevin Ross appeared on the bridge representing what he called Earth's diplomatic corps. He carried documents detailing humanity's plans for post-war reconstruction and development assistance, economic aid for displaced populations, technical support for species recovering from imperial occupation, educational programs designed to prevent future conflicts. "Admiral, the Kethmaran people will not be abandoned or punished," Ross explained. "Your empire's expansion will end, but your species will receive assistance transitioning to peaceful development. Humanity has no interest in revenge or retribution." The final display showed Ambassador Zixthor seated in what appeared to be a comfortable office on New Eden, the diplomat who had originally delivered the ultimatum that started. This conflict was now working as a cultural liaison, helping coordinate Kethmaran withdrawal from conquered territories. "Your people can choose cooperation or elimination," Ross continued. "But the era of galactic predation is over. Humanity has claimed the apex predator position, and we intend to use that authority to protect rather than exploit." Admiral Corveth looked around his bridge at officers who seemed decades younger than they had been a few hours ago. They had spent their careers in a galaxy where military might guaranteed political success. That galaxy no longer existed. "The Kethmaran Empire surrenders," he said quietly. Dr. Wright nodded approvingly. "Admiral, you've made the intelligent choice. Your species will survive and prosper under human protection. The alternative would have been extinction within the week." Jake Morrison materialized one final time carrying what appeared to be a simple paper document. The administrator who had triggered this confrontation by refusing evacuation now represented humanity's authority over galactic civilization. "Admiral Corveth, you'll be interested to know that 43 species previously conquered by various empires have requested human protection," he announced. "They're finally free to develop their own civilizations without fear of predatory neighbors." The holographic displays showed celebrations on dozens of worlds as displaced populations returned home and rebuilt their societies. Industrial facilities, producing goods for local consumption rather than imperial tribute. Children playing in parks that had been military installations days earlier.